DarKoaster is Busch Gardens Williamsburg's 10th roller coaster and a replacement for the former Curse of DarKastle attraction. It's located in the German section of the park in that same classic castle-like building, uses the same queue station area. They just retrofitted the ride area to fit in a roller coaster, in this case a family straddle coaster from Intamin. It features 2 launches, but actually it's 4. Because they only had a limited amount of space to work with, they had to get creative with this layout. Utilizing switch tracks, they're able to make it so that this ride vehicle traverses the course twice, bypassing the station area. It's actually really creative. The physical track length is just under 2,500 feet long, which would make for a pretty short ride experience if it didn't have this feature. But because it does, it's actually a pretty adequate ride length. For this experience, you climb aboard your snowmobile in one of 5 rows on the coaster, 2 across, making for only 10 riders per train. 2 trains equaling an estimated hourly capacity of about 400 people per hour. In other words, very, very low. This ride gets a long line. I heard at one point during opening weekend, the line was over 3.5 hours long. And that was factoring in breakdowns, and at one point they had to switch to one train because one was having problems. They clearly still have some bugs to work out. But regardless, it is so refreshing to have an attraction back in this building. I was a big fan of the original Curse of DarKastle ride. It really was like a universal level experience at a regional theme park. It even had a similar vehicle setup to Spider-Man. I believe they were both done by Oceaneering. I was really sad when it unexpectedly closed in 2017, and seeing it sit there empty for several years just felt like there was a hole in the park's lineup. I hated walking past this area with nothing to do there other than during Halloween when they put a lackluster haunt there, and then during Christmas time you can meet Santa. It is destined for something better, and I do think that DarKoaster is a worthy replacement for Curse of DarKastle. If you can't have a dark ride in there, why not go roller coaster? You don't have a ton of room to work with, but I feel like Busch Gardens Williamsburg absolutely maximized that space. The fact that they're able to fit in 2 launch sections is pretty impressive. And I'll even say, I thought the ride experience was a bit more forceful than I expected it to be. Now, if you remember when this ride was first announced, in my full analysis I released, one of the things I said is that the theming is going to make or break this attraction. That's what will separate it from being a fully immersive experience in just another coaster in a box. Because you see this animation and it looks very promising. But having some fun graphics is one thing, actually carrying it out is another. And unfortunately, I feel like Busch Gardens cheaped out a bit in this department. I don't know if they had budget cuts, but I definitely walked away from this experience wishing there was more. But that's not to say that the entire attraction felt that way. Obviously, the exterior and the full queue that is from the original attraction still looks fantastic. They had to update the station to accommodate a ride vehicle like this, and honestly, it felt like that's where their entire budget went because they had to blend it with that pre-existing structure. And the station looks fantastic. I love what they did here. They did add some props to help sell this story in the queue. They also turned that old pre-show room into part of the queue. Most of the props that you'll see here are like snowboarding or ski equipment, and that's because part of this whole theme is that you're escaping this snowstorm. It's a continuation off of the original Curse of DarKastle theme, where now you're trying to get out of his castle, there's a raging storm outside. It's a fun concept, but in actuality, it kind of feels like the ride is having an identity crisis. Good premise, but for a snowstorm theme, I felt like the park did kind of a poor job setting the scene for it. There's like little to no mention that there's a storm outside, pretty much until you get to the station where you see like through the windows that there's snow blowing. One thing I think they could have done is given the building the snow-covered effect like you get in the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. Think about all the buildings there. As of right now, you can see a couple icicles painted on the top, but they're barely noticeable as is. I think about how when you walk up to Alpengeist Plaza, it's very apparent that it's a snow theme. Bring that to DarKastle, and suddenly, this theme works a lot better. In its current state, it doesn't even sell the idea that it's wintertime, and so you're walking through this building and you're like, why is this like ski equipment here? It doesn't make any sense because there's like nothing snowy about this place. But then the identity crisis continues. During the ride experience, there is very little representation of a snowstorm. It's pretty much all just lightning and thunder. I feel like they couldn't decide what sort of theme to go with. I think the only reason that they went with snow here to begin with is because of this ride vehicle. Intamin's design was originally for a jet ski, but jet ski wouldn't work in this case, so they said, why don't we make them snowmobiles? I don't feel like they really look like snowmobiles. I definitely feel like it still looks like a jet ski, but that was their idea, and I just wish that we got a bit more of that actually during the experience. with the effects that they went for, it definitely feels cheap. I know some people are calling this like the Spirit Halloween roller coaster, primarily because of these skeletons that you pass by right here that literally look like they probably paid like 20 bucks for each. One of our friends called it Revenge of the Mummy, but with no budget. There's some sections of this layout where you're gliding along and there's literally nothing there but empty blackness, when there should be like something popping out at you. There's a few moments like that, and there's a couple parts that they do well. I like during the last launch when the lightning bolts are going off one by one on either side, bam, 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 bam. And then the best effect is at the end of the ride when you go through King Ludwig's mouth. He's coming in closer, they blast some fog up. It's the only time that you actually get fog in the layout, despite when you look at this B-roll footage that there's all this added fog. That is not actually there for the ride experience. I think they just did that for promos. I'll tell you one thing they didn't cheap out on though, and that is the temperature inside the building. It seriously feels about like 10 degrees colder in there than when you're in the station. So if they're trying to make it feel cool, like there's a storm coming, then yeah, that part totally worked. So in that regard, during the summer when it's like really hot out, that's gonna feel nice. The other interesting thing is that while it is certainly dark in that building, it is not pitch black like it is during Verbolten, where you have no idea where you're going next. On DarKoaster, you can still see the hand in front of your face and tell which direction you're about to go from there. The camera doesn't pick it up, but your eyes absolutely adjust. I think that's another point where I say that maybe if they had added some more theming, that would help distract you from the fact that you can see entire sections of track in this building. Now, here's what's interesting. I'd place it a little bit lower thrill level than Invader as a good stepping stone to work your way up to Verbolten. And Verbolten is much more of a thrill ride than DarKoaster. However, DarKoaster has a much scarier theme. Just the entire premise around it, I think, is going to scare little kids. Which is interesting then that they chose to combine a relatively mild family ride with a theme that's meant to be kind of intense. Like, I'm putting myself in the shoes of someone who's like just in elementary school, hasn't ridden very many roller coasters. I think this would totally freak him out. Now, I also wouldn't really say that this is a ride for like adults, because I feel like a lot of adults will be kind of underwhelmed with it. I was talking to some people who were there for DarKoaster opening day, and based off of the whole marketing behind this attraction, they definitely expected more and they got off a little underwhelmed. So it just kind of makes you wonder who exactly is the target audience for this ride. Again, I feel like it's kind of having an identity crisis. It's trying to be both while simultaneously being neither. But really that solely just comes down to the theme. I mean, if you were to plop this roller coaster outside, it's absolutely one that kids would be able to enjoy. But the thing is, I don't think this ride would work at all if it was outside. It'd be a pretty lame experience, to be honest. Because it's in the dark and they made an attempt to theme it, it does make it fun. The more I rode it, the more it grew on me. It's still better than some other family indoor coasters I can think of, such as Laugh Track, or Skull Mountain, Dark Knight, but not as cool as some of the ones that I did over in Japan, like Space Fantasy at Universal, or Panic Coaster Back Dan at Tokyo Dome City. When I first rode those, they wowed me for the first time, and that wasn't really the case for this one. I know that we shouldn't always come to expect exactly what's in an animation to make it into the real thing. It even says in the bottom of the animation, show elements may vary. But it just feels like you're overselling when you see an animation of this roller coaster going around and there's this big display of this like storm effect in the background. I was almost imagining like a huge projection on one of the back walls, but no. I mean, overall, I do still prefer the original Curse of DarKastle, but if you're not going to do a dark ride, this is a worthy replacement. The only real downside with the roller coaster section is pretty much after the second launch into the brake run is surprisingly shaky. It's kind of weird and very noticeable. So for DarKoaster's final score, I'm going to give it a 6.5 out of 10. I feel like this is one of those examples of being on the right track, having a lot of good ideas, but just a couple small changes would really help. And understand that while I was underwhelmed, that doesn't mean I dislike this attraction at all. I really do love the idea. I'm just trying to be as constructive as possible. Say, here's what's working, here's what could be better, because I want Busch Gardens to succeed. I really do. It just so happens that as of right now, it feels like they could have done a bit better. Maybe they were pressed for time or had financial constraints, but they really did have the right idea going in. But as of right now, I wouldn't say it's worth the wait and the lines that it's getting. Personally, I probably wouldn't wait more than like 30 minutes for it. I just worry that it's ever going to be like that, because currently with its capacity, this is easily going to be the longest line in the park for a long time. So be aware that this is 100% a roller coaster that you should rope drop right when you get to the park at opening, or wait till the very end of the day. But if you're going to the park, you should do it. It's a nice change of pace from all of the other attractions here, and it does fit well in their lineup. There's no other roller coaster in the park that has a seating setup like this, but I think it's safe to say that after this, Busch Gardens Williamsburg has enough multi-launch coasters. So let me know down in the comments below if you agree with the points that I brought up, if you've gotten the chance to experience DarKoaster. And if you disagree, please let me know why. And stay tuned for more coaster reviews here at Coaster Studios, and I'll see you next time.